We're rolling.
Oh,
Rolling.
we rolling. Hello, world. We are back for week 5 after not doing week 4. So we're doing very well at doing every other week for the pod. But we're gonna try and be better. Most of the time, it's my fault. And I do apologize if I am loud at any portion of this. The Yankees are playing right now. It is 2-0. First and third, 2 outs. Judge is up. So I may yell in a minute. So headphone warning. Um, but we are back for week 5. We got some games to talk about, and we can go from there. So, Jacob, walk us through our game of the week from last week.
I don't think we really had a game of the week because we didn't do the podcast, but this was the closest game of the week at least. Um, Trevor, well, your quarterbacks finally put up some points, mainly Trevor. You still made the wrong QB decision, so that that streak continues at least. You got that going for you. Um, Brian
And I would like
Robinson.
to apologize to everyone. My cohort seems to be a little rusty at this, not announcing what game he wants to talk about, and just going in and talking about Trevor Lawrence. So for anyone that couldn't figure it out, he's talking
Everyone.
about myself against Mr. Tom Big T DeSalvi. And I scraped out a win by 1. Judge flies out. Okay, so I'm concentrating again. So it was a big week, as Jake said. Trevor Lawrence did look better, and I think he continues to look better. But Kirk Cousins put up a solid 35 sitting on my bench, which is pretty depressing.
I don't know. 35 points is still pretty good. But I guess I think the biggest problems you're starting to have some running back injuries slash issues. I don't know what's going on with ETN, but yeah, Tank certainly looks better right now. So no idea what's going on there. But anyway, so that's your biggest problem right now. I mean, Marvin's been somewhat disappointing, still getting targets, so not the biggest deal. But Swift kind of looks back, so I guess that's a good thing for you.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think ETN we all knew was problematic. For anyone who wants my real feelings on ETN, go look at how much I loved Tanks Bigsby a year ago when I told everyone he was going to be the starter. I was wrong, but maybe now I was a year early. But I'm not as concerned with my running backs. Brian Robinson, although he's now questionable this week, Swift looks pretty good. Najee's a solid 10 points every single week. Like I feel like I can scrape by running back wise. I feel like I have just enough pieces where I'm not worried about it. Or wide receiver, I feel pretty great still. I mean, Harrison, I think, is still a top 20 wide receiver. Jefferson is Jefferson. And then, DJ Moore is looking like Caleb's number one guy and looking pretty awesome in Chicago. So, I feel like I've got a nice little trio there that does some decent work for me. So I really cannot complain. On the other hand, Derrick Henry continues to be great for Tom. The whole Jets chaos hurts Brees Hall. Um, so I don't know what the Jets chaos really is. I mean, Salah got fired this morning, yesterday. And then he starts Bateman and London because he has to, and they combine for 40 points. So I feel pretty good. If you would have told me they combined for 40, I would have told you I lost by a good amount. So I feel pretty good beating Tom by that 1 point on this one.
yeah, I mean, he had neighbors who was out this week, so that probably hurts him a decent amount. Obviously, Tom's kind of has two really good quarterbacks, pretty consistent. Not sure what's going on with Brees. They seem to just not give him any touches anymore for some reason. So I don't know. Maybe Aaron and Rodgers decided he didn't like him for some reason. He's still on the field a lot, but no touches. So Aaron Rodgers doing his thing, and hopefully that will change. But I somewhat doubt it, given Nathaniel Hackett's their offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and I love all the rumors where I was talking to Trevor about it, and he's like, "Yeah, ESPN said Salah tried to fire Hackett, and Rodgers said no, so Salah got fired." Like, I don't know if that's true, but if it is, that's crazy. And it does kind of feel like Rodgers is controlling the organization. If they start trading for Devontae Adams now, then it's clear he's controlling the organization. But I'd be a little worried as a Jet fan.
On the bright side, if you're a Jet fan, Aaron Rodgers is only under contract for this year, so maybe you just let him walk and go do ayahuasca in the woods somewhere or something like that.
He's going to be the GM next year. Didn't you hear? But yeah, I think we can kind of bump on to the next game. This was a 1-point game, 109 to 108. Tom continues to be one of the top teams. This was a big Penn State game, given that it's switchover week. We now have the crosstown rivalry week starting. So we both end up 3-2 at the end of the Penn State portion of the starting schedule, which brings us to our next game where we have Mr. Trevor versus the number one team in the league, Cam. 5-0 Cam beats Trevor 103-101. And Trevor is kicking himself for Sam Darnold starting over Danny Dimes, which is just fun to say.
Yeah. I don't know. I think given the situation, he probably would always start Darnold. Also, I just don't trust Danny Dimes to do anything, especially Neighbors was out last week, so I wouldn't trust him to score more than 3 points. Given Darnold scored 5 points, so that is what it is. But Cam sneaks by. I mean, Cam started Tyler Huntley and then Christian Kirk in the Superflex, so getting a win like that is pretty impressive, especially given DK didn't really do much, and most people didn't do much. It was really big week from Tyler Kraft, big week from Brian Thomas.
Cook was okay.
Yeah. Thomas seems like he's that guy. Cam certainly was super high on him coming into the draft. I'm pretty sure he had him above Rome.
He did. So, that is true.
So Cam looks right on that. Cam also feels validated about Rome, so not sure how Chris feels about that. But yeah. And then looking at
I responded how I felt about that. He is just incorrect. I'm sorry for my momentary distraction. Volpe just threw it into the stands again. Because best fielder in short. Whatever. Okay. I'll stop complaining about baseball. But yes, I feel fine about Rome. Rome is, wide receiver 4 for me. He still, I think, has great value. So I threw him on the trade block just to see what was out there. Someone offered me a trade that included him. So I was like, maybe I'll see what's out there for him. Not going to name names, Jake. But on the other end, Trevor still sitting at 3-2. I feel like he has to be pretty happy with the production he got at running back this week, considering he started McLaughlin and Trey Sermon and ended up with 25 points. But Garrett Wilson maybe is starting to pick up. And, if he starts the right quarterback, he wins this easily. Trevor still lacks a lot of depth, but his team is pretty put together.
I mean, he's got some depth. It was a little unlucky, obviously. Jonathan Taylor's hurt this week. Barkley's on bye. So that kind of, he was always at a disadvantage this week. Obviously, Hurts was also on bye for Cam. So both at somewhat equal of a disadvantage, I guess I'd say overall. And it was a close game. So ended up being the way it is. I think Trevor really needs to get Devontae Adams back because Deshaun Watson apparently cannot play football anymore. So Amari Cooper seems to be not usable until further notice.
And so question for you with Trevor now. Drake May has announced the starter. Now he's sitting at 4 quarterbacks. If you're Trevor, do you move Rodgers? Do you move Darnold? Do you move Danny Dimes? Do you try and get rid of one of them for maybe another running back, another wide receiver piece? As he's theoretically a playoff team right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't. That being said, New England's a weird ass organization. I don't know what they're gonna do. Drake May could have a bad half, and they could just be like, "Oh, Jacoby Brissett needs to come back and play for us." I think I made my feelings clear. I thought Drake May should start the year. There's no reason to play Jacoby Brissett, but yeah, you have to imagine they're just going to move forward. So I imagine he's looking to get rid of Darnold or Rodgers. Not sure what you're getting for either of those right now. Obviously, Darnold was really good until this week.
Yeah, and I think that actually kind of is a nice segue into the next game where we had maybe a little bit of an upset, possibly. Just with Biondi being 3-1, he loses to Taint. I said possibly, relax. But I think it's a nice little segue given that maybe Biondi is the perfect candidate to go get one of those quarterbacks. He started Deshaun Watson and Joe Flacco this week. He's got Bryce Young still sitting there. He does have Goff, which is actually, I forgot he had Goff when I started that sentence. But I saw who he started and was like, oh, maybe Biondi fits right in there nicely. But at the same time, with Tua being hurt and Herbert being where he is, maybe Taint is someone to go get somebody. So interesting matchup, but Taint pulls out the win 98-87. So far, the lowest scoring game we've talked about so far.
Yeah. Like you said, Tua is hurt. Herbert was on bye last week. He should be back. Gibbs was hurt for Taint. So got to be a pretty nice win for him with all of that being going against him, basically. Obviously, Biondi has his own injury concerns. Nico got hurt during this game. Apparently, that's a really bad hamstring injury because they put him on IR for a hamstring, which is kind of weird. That being said, Mixon should be back sometime soon. So he has that coming back. He has a lot of RB depth. Not sure when Puka comes back, and then he also has TJ Hawkinson. Man, he has a lot of injury problems. But
yeah, I mean, and on the other side, Taint has some weird issues as well. I mean, Taint really seems to have a wide receiver problem after Jamar Chase. I'm not super comfortable with, and like Pittman's probably his number 2, but I'm not overly in love with Pittman.
Now Pittman's hurt too.
Yeah, that's true too. I thought he may still play. But maybe I'm wrong.
I read he's out at least a couple weeks. So
okay, he's still listed as doubtful, so I didn't realize that. But that's problematic for Taint. So I don't know. Going into now, both those teams starting to play the other division. It'll be interesting to see kind of where they line up. And I feel like in this league, you never fully know what the league looks like until you have some of those cross division matchups. And with them starting this week, it should be interesting kind of to get that take. But I think, unless you have anything more, that brings us to Lemon Chop versus Trent. This is just a week of really close games. Trent ends up beating Lemon by 4. Jaden Daniels continues to be kind of that guy for Lemon. And even Baker, I mean, and even Bo Nix. Lamon's QB situation actually looks way better than I think any of us predicted. And I don't know if you can say the same about Trent, even though he did get the win.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen's still QB6 on the year. Obviously, all of Stafford's weapons are hurt right now, assuming they come back eventually. Trent's team should be looking on the upswing, but I think Lemon has definitely been the surprise team so far this year. Obviously, took the loss this week. Huge week from Rico Dowdle. He seems to completely have that job. Zeke's not really getting touches anymore, so that is what it is. Big comeback week for Ayuk, so that's good to see for Trent's team. And then Godwin kind of did his usual thing. I don't think there's any huge problems on Lamon's side. He still has the issue. He doesn't have any running backs, really. Both his running backs are somewhat backups on their team. I mean, Charbonnet is the backup, and then Bucky kind of is in a 50-50 split at this point. So if he wanted to compete, he could probably go get some somewhat cheap running back somewhere, but not sure what he's planning on doing.
No, and I think Lemon running back is a really big problem, and I don't know if getting one allows him to compete. I guess I'm still not assuming that Jaden Reed and Xavier Worthy keep up the production they've had so far this year. As much as I do like them both, just feels like eventually they're going to come down to earth a little bit. But hey, Brock Bowers putting up 20. All of a sudden, he's looking like a pretty decent. Obviously we knew he was going to be special, but he's like tight end 1 or 2 for the year now, which is, a pretty. I thought you may have the exact number.
He's tight end 1.
Oh, there you go. So I mean, what a draft pick by Lemon. What a draft by Lemon. I'm coming back to it with, with Worthy, with Daniels, with Bowers. I mean, he rebuilt faster than we anticipated, and I think he still has some more picks coming up next year. But unlike that, we go to really what ended up being the big blowout of the week. Skull Daddy just obliterates Mitch by 80 points, more than doubling him up. And Sean, as soon as you say he's done, he goes up and scores 154 points. So maybe is Skullcat back?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hubbard's been a real surprise. I thought he was pretty solid last year, but definitely didn't see him doing this.
Oh, God, Brittany Mahomes is on TV.
Obviously, they got Brooks coming back, so not sure what that split ends up looking like. Chase Brown, I know the other guy got hurt this week, Zach Moss. So,
yeah.
Seems like I still don't think he's very good. He's still under 4 yards a carry this year. But if he's going to get all that work, he's going to be he'll be solid. And then the quarterbacks are still very good for Skullcap, and Mooney had a huge week. So I definitely wouldn't expect him to score 153 points every week, but he's definitely a solid team. And then who knows when McCaffrey and Chubb end up coming back or the other things for him.
And, he did that. His wide receivers put up almost 50 points with Amon-Ra on his bye. So, you got to love that. On the other side, Burrow puts up 35 and Mitch scores 70. So that's not great. A-Chain is now having kind of what I think a lot of people thought he may. He wasn't a 3-down back, and Miami was using him as a 3-down back. Mitch's wide receivers have not shown up for I don't know how many years in a row with A.J. Brown being hurt. Will Levis on a bye. He starts Dalton. If I'm Carolina, how I'm still starting Andy Dalton, how I ever started Andy Dalton, I don't understand. But it just doesn't I would have just left Bryce and developed. But Bryce came in and looked okay this week, so maybe that continues. I don't know. But Mitch, I think he had a lot of buys, like a lot of people on buy. This was kind of his give up week. And I think he's a few pieces away from being a real contender.
Yeah, I think AJ Brown's back this week, so that'll really help spread things out. James Conner will stay at running back, and then I think he'll probably start Pollard this week, I'd assume. So he'll get him back, and then you have a pretty solid lineup. Obviously, I think Mitch is still looking for a QB2. He threw that out there before. Not sure.
Hey, Trevor.
Yeah, so maybe Mitch is the person that goes and trades for a quarterback. Dalton Kincaid's been super disappointing so far. He should get Njoku back somewhat soon. So I don't know. I think Mitch will have better days. Burrow, that defense in Cincinnati is awful. So I think Burrow is going to be putting up lots of points this year. So I still like Mitch's team. I think he is a contender. A-Chain has a concussion, so that's not – I mean, it is a big deal, but he also is on bye this week, so they're not playing anyway.
So well, that brings us to your favorite game. Jacob beats up on our friend Daniel by 8 whole points. And, boy, I was with Jake Monday night while the Saints were playing, and he was stressing – super hard about Kareem Hunt, who looks like a fantastic pickup by Danny, who after Mitch created all that controversy and Cam joined Mitch's side, Danny showed us all that he knew better. And, big win by Jake. But, gosh, Danny, 102, you beat half the league this week, but could not get the real W that you needed.
Yeah, pretty disappointing for him from Addison. Obviously, Moss got hurt in the middle of the game, so that was obviously he didn't score that many points. He didn't finish the game, and then Mahomes has been super disappointing this year. He's basically scoring like 15 points a game. Not what you'd expect, but at the same time, I think Juju Smith is like their number one receiver at this point, outside of Worthy. So it is what it is. Not sure he's going to have the biggest fantasy year. Obviously, Mahomes is still Mahomes, ton of value, but at the same time, Danny's still lacking at running back, so he's not really looking to compete super hard anyway. I saw he dropped Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith's been pretty good, so I was somewhat surprised he did that. But at the same time, I know he needs to start a tight end this week, so it is what it is.
Yeah, I assume I'm looking at his lineup now, and maybe he really doesn't have anybody else to drop, but I assume there's somebody else he could have done something with. But I guess not. And with you, well, I'll hit on Mahomes first. Yeah, he's QB 15 this year, which is, a little ridiculous to say. But on your end, Kyler and Fields continue to look pretty good fantasy wise. Higgins had a great game along with Chase and Burrow and every Bengal that deals with catching and throwing the football. And then your running backs put up a nice little 30 spot for you with Stevenson and Javonte Williams, which is nice because I think a lot of people have given up on Javonte. So, nice to see him have a little fight back. But, nice game for you. You started the right QBs and you ended up with a nice little win.
Yep. Pretty happy with it. Scored 110. Not really a competitive team, so I'll take 110 anytime. All right. I put our picks record from week 4 because we still haven't done that. So I went 2-4. You went 3-3. Total, I'm 7-5, and you're 4-8. So
that sounds about right.
Moving down to the standings, Big T's at the top of the Penn State division, followed by Lamb Chop and you, and then Skullcap, Weop, and Trent all at 2-3. So everyone is pretty competitive in that division. It's really anyone's fight still. Trent still can come back. He has some injury problems that should go away soon. Cup should be back soon. Tyreek Hill should get Tua back soon, apparently. So interesting to see how that'll go.
Is that a thing? Really?
They're saying he's coming back week 8.
That's crazy to me, but okay. If they say so, that dude needs to retire, but that's just for his own health. So I'll be quiet about it.
All right. Moving on to Stony Brook division, Cam squeaks out a 97-point win every week, so he is now 5-0. Just probably needs like a few more wins to lock himself into the playoffs at this point. So I think he really has to like where he's at. Obviously, I think there's still some problems with this team. He really doesn't have a second quarterback right now, which is kind of rough, but he also has some picks. So if he wants to be competitive, now could be the time. Maybe he goes and trades for one of Trevor's quarterbacks too.
And I mean, I think usually 7 to 8 wins locks you in. He's now got a 2-game lead on the entire league. The next best team is 3-2. So, with him, then you got Biondi, Trevor, and Taint tied at 3-2. And then you and Danny, 1-4 and 0-5. You finally got a win. It was the game of the I'm going to be nice and say really nice people who don't win often, which leaves us to our power rankings. How you don't have Cam at number 1, I don't understand. Cam, I put you number one. You're 5-0. You deserve to be number one. And Jake is a hater. He doesn't even have you in the podium position.
I do not.
Hater. Haterade. Hater
Cam,
man.
if you'd like to get into one of the podium positions, you need to go get a second quarterback. Starting Christian Kirk at your super flex every week is not going to be the thing. So I have Big T at number one. I think he just has a really safe base with the two quarterbacks. Derrick Henry looks like he still has it. I think Brees will maybe get better, and then his receiver combo with London and Neighbors looks pretty darn good as well.
Yeah, and I think Tom is very clearly number two. And it's very rude of you to have him number one. I love you, Tommy boy, but you're number two because Cam is number one. But you have.
I have a really hard time with the next 3 to 5.
100%.
But right now I put Steve there. I think he's put up the most points, I want to say. Maybe not. But he's put up a ton of points so far. I think he's got a ton of RB depth. Hawkinson's coming back soon. Puka will be back eventually. His big problem is the quarterback situation as well, but I think his team's just better built.
He does not have the most points out of the next grouping, by the way. The person who has the next points has the next most points after Tom. You have it number 10.
That would make sense.
As the second most amount of points, second most amount of points in the league, and you have him at 10.
You have him at 8.
Okay, but 8's better than 10. So, I mean, he deserves to be lower. His running backs are no longer starters. They were for a while. They're not anymore. But 10. So, watch yourself. Biondi is then after him, closely followed by Trevor. And then Sean and I come in somewhat after that. So, I mean, it's a crapshoot. That whole middle is a crapshoot. It's going to take us 3 weeks to figure out where everyone belongs. So I don't even know if we need to go through what we have it as. So we both have Trevor 3. I had Biondi 5. Well, you had him 2. You had Cam 4. I talked about Cam. I had me 4. You had me 5. You had Mitch 6. I had Mitch 10. So difference of opinion there. You had Taint 7. I had Taint 6. And then really we just kind of go on a nice little diagonal where I have one person ahead of you, Sean 7, 8. I have Lamon 8. You have him 10. We both have Trent 9. And then you and Danny round us off. So we're in fun shape there, but it's going to take us 3 weeks for that middle to make any sense, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Injuries will probably factor in there, I presume. Still early in the season, so still going to be a ton of injuries moving forward. That'll affect things. But yeah, I think power rankings doesn't really matter much at this point of the season, so it is what it is. I think we're ready to move on to the previews. I think the best matchup of the week this week was Trevor versus Mitchell. I think this will be pretty close. They're both 3-2, I want to say. Or
yes.
Mitch is
2 and 3.
2 and 3. So two pretty close teams. Trevor gets Saquon back this week, so that's really nice for him. I put his second running back as Taylor/Sermon. I don't think Jonathan Taylor's playing this week, but he's still questionable, so had to put him in there. And then on Mitch's side, he had Pollard versus Indianapolis and James Conner. I think Saquon's obviously the best out of this group, but I think I like Mitch's combo better because Trey Sermon is bad at football.
So, and I do think Trey Sermon is playing. I don't think there's any chance JT is touching the field this week, but I think Saquon could be enough to beat Conner and Pollard, although Conner and Pollard have some better matchups, which is pretty cool for them. So I'm more confident that Mitch's side will score 20, but I think Trevor's side can easily bump up, 25, 30. So I would give the slight advantage to Trevor there. Just Saquon off a bye, even against that good Cleveland defense, is just too good. And I think the Eagles may figure something out, which actually hurts Saquon's production because they're kind of like the Giants from the last few years where they're just like, I don't know what to do, so let's give the ball to him because he's good at football. So we'll see.
Well, my theory with Saquon this week is that Cleveland's just really bad, so they're just gonna be running clock out the second half.
Fair enough.
But
anyway, that goes to quarterbacks. And we got Burrow with a pretty fun matchup for him. And then you got to imagine Mitch is starting Will Levis over Dalton, maybe. I mean, I don't know.
I think you can start Dalton. I think Chicago's a pretty tough matchup last week. Dalton was good the previous 2 weeks, so if Dalton's starting, I'd probably just start Dalton. I think Burrow has a really nice matchup. I definitely give the advantage to Mitch on this. Obviously, Rodgers has a tough matchup with Buffalo, and then Daniel Jones actually has a really good matchup versus the Bengals. So
I promise I won't interrupt too much anymore, but I feel like you need to know this live time. Giancarlo Stanton just stole a base. Like, full on, ran on the pitch and stole a base. They threw down to second, and he was safe.
Did he get hurt?
No, my dude's fine. All 6'6", 400 pounds of them. He's fine. I love Giancarlo. On the other hand, you're right. I don't like the Rodgers matchup all that much, but Danny Jones matchup is pretty good. However, I am going to go with Mitch's quarterbacks because I think Burrow may have quite the day.
Yep. Moving on to receiver, Trevor starting his usual combo, Garrett Wilson, CeeDee Lamb. I don't think either of those is great matchups. Detroit's not bad. Obviously, CeeDee's a top receiver, so it doesn't really matter matchup-wise. Garrett Wilson had 22 targets last week, so if he's going to get 22 targets, then his matchups don't matter either. Looking at Mitch's side, matchups probably matter a little more. He's got Debo against Seattle tomorrow, and then A.J. Brown versus Cleveland. A.J. Brown, first week back, maybe a little slow. Debo, really bad week last week, and on a short week, I think I'll give slight advantage to Trevor at receiver.
Oh, I think Trevor has a real big advantage. I think Detroit is I don't know what stats you look at, but Detroit allows a bunch of wide receiver points. So, as far as I'm aware, so I think CeeDee, good matchup. Garrett Wilson, he is the guy, and I think that the Jets will need to still feed him the ball. So I think big advantage there. I think A.J. Brown probably struggles a little bit, and Debo really hasn't gotten off to a great start for him. I think he's like wide receiver 40, something like that right now. Which brings us to tight end. You got Kittle versus Kincaid. Kittle against Seattle, I think, is a pretty decent matchup. As you said, Kincaid's been struggling a little bit, not getting the targets he needs. So I think Kittle's a decent advantage here for Trevor as well.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. So moving on to the flex, Amari Cooper and Deontay Johnson, both probably somewhat underperforming. Well, Deontay was great until last week. I'd expect a bounce back, like I said, with Dalton. So that same logic applies to Deontay Johnson this week. Amari Cooper, I just have no trust in the Cleveland offense right now. So going to give the advantage to Mitch. And that means that I give the overall advantage to Mitch as well.
I truly think that flex is just like a race to 10 points. And I don't have a lot of faith in either of them. But I do think that Trevor ends up pulling this out. I don't think Burrow is enough to beat Trevor, which is really the only person that I give Mitch a big advantage on. So I think Trevor goes to 4-2, Mitch goes to 2-4, and then, that starts making things a little clearer for both of them. So we go opposite game one, and now we're on game two, which I think is maybe my favorite matchup of the week, because you've got the returning to power skull cap at 3-2 versus the 5-0 Cam. Can he keep it up? Sean is starting Lamar off a great week and Geno Smith. And then Cam gets Hurts back. And right now he's got Christian Kirk, but I'm assuming maybe he starts Aiden O'Connell now that he's been named the starter. I would throw him out there.
I still don't trust anything to do with that Las Vegas offense whatsoever. That being said, I also don't trust Christian Kirk. So
I'd rather go Aiden O'Connell than Christian Kirk, especially if you're going to start Brian Thomas, because you're limiting yourself no matter what, because there's only so many throws Trevor Lawrence is going to make. So I think Sean has a pretty big advantage. At QB, I think the Washington matchup's not too bad for Lamar, and even San Francisco hasn't been great this year defensively, so I don't hate the matchup for Geno. So pretty big advantage for Sean QB-wise.
Yep, he's definitely got the advantage at the QB positions. I think it's pretty easy. I don't think Hurts has the biggest week anyway, and then I mean, Kirk and Brian Thomas just going to steal from each other. So I'll assume Brian Thomas gets more of the points. Moving on to RB, Sean has Hubbard versus Atlanta and J.K. Dobbins versus Denver. And Cam has James Cook at the Jets and Jordan Mason at Seattle. I think J.K. Dobbins has a somewhat tough matchup. I don't think Atlanta's the easiest against the run either. So Sean has somewhat tough matchups, but at the same time, so does Cam. I don't think it really matters for the 49ers. They're going to be able to run the ball against anyone. That Shanahan offense is just nuts about that. So I don't really care about that. I know James Cook popped up on the injury report, and then the Jets are also rough against the run anyway. So I don't love the matchup for Cam's any of these running backs. I guess I like Jordan Mason the most, so I will say that Cam has a slight advantage.
When the matchups aren't good, I should say, I usually just go for what running back room I think has more talent, and I think that is Cam's. So I give Cam an advantage here, but I don't think it's huge. It's a pretty minimal advantage for Cam here, which brings us to the wide receivers. Sean has Amon-Ra and his very trusty Mike Evans. Cam going with DK and Stephon Diggs. Personally, I'm thinking this is a pretty big advantage for Sean. Amon-Ra coming off a bye. I always like Mike Evans. Diggs, I'm still not sold on Diggs in Houston. I know he's like a top 10 wide receiver right now. And, Decaf is also DK Metcalf. Is a top 15 wide receiver, but San Francisco is not the easiest matchup receiver wise. And, I think Mike Evans can maybe put up a big number against New Orleans. Spencer Rattler starting, maybe New Orleans is not going to have so much time of possession or, not really moving the ball very well. So I have faith in Sean's wide receivers more than Cam's this week, and I don't think it's super close.
I'm actually going to give an advantage to Cam. I think Diggs gets a bump since Nico will be out this week. I think DK's having a real good year, and then I don't think San Francisco's defense is the same as it has been in recent years. So I'm going to give a slight advantage to Cam. I still think Sean's receivers are really good. Mike Evans has had a couple big touchdown weeks in a row, so maybe that doesn't happen this week and things look a little more normal. Moving on to tight ends, I'll give the advantage to Sean. It's Trey McBride versus Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft has been awesome this year, but definitely think Trey McBride, just more talent. They're playing each other, so I don't think it's a huge. I mean, I do think it's a somewhat big advantage, but at the same time, tight ends score like 10 points, so.
Yeah, I just have more faith in Trey McBride to score 10 points, honestly. I think Tucker Kraft has had 2 big weeks, not really a great year before that. He's doing like 3-4 points, which is fine. But, he's had 2 big weeks. I can't imagine that continues. So I think McBride is a decent advantage there for Sean. And then in the flex, Darnell Mooney versus Brian Thomas. I love Darnell Mooney, but Cam definitely has the advantage here, in my opinion. Brian Thomas has continued to show he is that guy. There are no other weapons that I care about for Trevor Lawrence to throw to. He is wide receiver one already, and I think he beats out Mooney for the flex.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a tough matchup, Jalen Johnson. So it'll definitely be a big test for Brian Thomas. I think it's somewhat even, but just to be controversial, I'll say Darnell Mooney, just for shits and giggles. Carolina is a really bad defense, and he's going to get the second corner on that defense. So I could see Darnell Mooney outscoring him. So for fun, I'll say Sean.
Sure.
And then I also picked Sean this week as well.
I also went Sean, so we're both predicting the upset of Cam. So we'll see how that goes. Sorry, Cam.
That usually goes well.
If
Moving on to the next game.
Agree on something, pick the other way. If you could throw money down on something, if Jake and I agree, bet opposite.
Yep. Moving on to the next game, we have Bryce versus Trent. Bryce at quarterback has Purdy at Seattle and Herbert at Denver. And Trent has Josh Allen at the Jets and Tank Dell at New England. I think similar to what I said about Diggs, Dell gets a bump with Nico being out. That being said, he hasn't really looked super healthy since last year, so not sure exactly what Tank Dell we're getting at this point. Josh Allen, probably the best quarterback here. I mean, definitely the best fantasy quarterback here. But I think the combination of Bryce's quarterbacks will outweigh the advantage he has with Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I think none of them have a good matchup. All of them are on the road. Herbert having to go to Denver is miserable. Purdy having to go to Seattle is miserable. And then Josh Allen playing the Jets. I am slightly going to give Josh Allen, I think, the bump here just because the Jets are chaos. And I don't think that gets solved this week. I think it may look pretty bad for the Jets this week, and maybe Josh Allen is able to take advantage that way. Even though that Jets defense is still great, it's the Jets offense that's problematic. But for some reason, I'm just thinking, with all the chaos and with the Jets, that Josh Allen gets a little advantage this week. However, at running back, I think it's another interesting one with Josh Jacobs and Rico Dowdle for Trent versus Gibbs and Spears. I think Trent has a pretty decent advantage here now that Rico is kind of that starter. I almost view him as RB1 for Trent this week, even though it's against Detroit. And then Gibbs and Spears, Spears is still RB2. Gibbs has a lot of competition with DeMont in that backfield. I just feel more confident with Trent's RBs going into this week.
Yeah, I think it's really close. I think Jacobs has a really good matchup, so that's nice. Dowdle has a really hard matchup. Detroit's been awesome against the run this year. Dallas has been awful, so maybe Gibbs has a huge game. I'm gonna say slight advantage to Bryce here. I think he still has a little bit of enough, even though Kyron being on bye definitely hurts. Moving on to the wide receiver rooms, I still have Pittman in here for now. I'm pretty sure he's out this week. So I'm not really sure where Bryce goes after that. I was looking through his lineup quickly, and I mean, it looks like maybe he starts Jakobi Meyers, and then he starts that Green Bay running back at flex.
Last week he started Gabe Davis, if that means anything to you.
Yeah, I don't think he'll do that again. So I'm going to assume he starts a running back and starts Jakobi Meyers for now. Then I think McLaurin's getting a lot more targets now. Ayuk seems to be somewhat back since he didn't report to camp. So I'm going to give Trent the advantage here, even though I think Chase will probably have a huge game.
Yeah, I think Chase has enough of a big game, and I do assume Jacoby Myers is that wide receiver too. Jacoby Myers throughout his life has just been like a 10-point machine. I think that puts Taint over the top, and I do think that at wide receiver, just with having wide receiver one being Jamar, I put them above Ayuk and McLaurin. However, at tight end, Sam Laporta, I do give him the edge over Hunter Henry. That Taint's pulling out there by a good amount, but again, it's tight end, so Laporta is gonna, more than likely have 10, and Hunter Henry's gonna have 5. So that
Yeah.
advantage doesn't mean that much to me.
Yeah, I'm gonna predict a big Sam Florida comeback. Obviously, he was really good last year. The Detroit passing game has been oddly somewhat off this year so far. I could see that kind of turning around, especially at tight end. I don't think Dallas has a great cover type person to cover him. So I'm gonna give a pretty big advantage to Trent at the tight end position. And then at the flex position, I don't know who Bryce is going to start, but I'm definitely going to give a big advantage to Godwin. Godwin's been awesome this year. Mike Evans struggles against New Orleans for some reason, so maybe Godwin has a huge game. And for that reason, I'm going to go with Trent overall as well.
Yeah, so I went Taint overall, so another disagreement on our end. I think it's probably pretty close, but just I for whatever reason, Chase sitting there brings it for me. I just have a little bit more faith top to bottom, even though some of these positions I did say Trent was going to win. But that brings us to Lamon versus Biondi. I think this one's probably not going to be too close, although we keep saying that. But with Xavier Worthy out, like Biondi is starting Josh Downs, which leaves his flex to be like Lad McConkey. Biondi's got a lot of problems. He doesn't have a running back I trust. I love Biondi's running backs. I think QB wise, Jaden Daniels and Baker, I do think probably win the QB battle over Goff and then whoever's starting for Indy. But I think Biondi gets the win here. Kamara sitting at a flex is better than any running back that Lamon's putting on the field. And, I think Biondi gets a nice little bounce back after a tough one last week.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. I wish I knew if Flacco was playing or not. I might go contrarian here if I did know that, but since I think Richardson probably plays, it seemed like he was somewhat close to playing last week. That means I don't trust Josh Downs to do a single thing because that man completes half his passes. And yeah, and the running back problem is Lamb Chop's problem. So I'm gonna go Steve as well on this one.
Which brings us to our two favorite games of the week. We got your game against Tom, and then followed by my game versus Danny. But I think this one is not
Week.
too.
Oh, he's back
Oh, god dang it! Did I get lost again?
for a second, but you're back now.
Uh,
Going into the QB situation for my game against Tom. Tom has Stroud at New England and Love at Arizona. I have Kyler at Green Bay and Fields at Las Vegas. I actually think I have a shot this week at quarterback, which isn't the case for most weeks for this matchup. I think my matchups are a little bit better. So I'll give myself the win at QB. Why not?
I will not. I think that Tom's QBs win. I think that Arizona matchup is pretty good for Jordan Love. And who knows what New England looks like with Drake May as their starting quarterback. Just who knows how long he holds onto the ball. So I don't think it's crazy, but I give Tom a decent advantage there. And I'm going to do the same with the running backs, even though I just think Derrick Henry carries the day for Tom. And if you're still starting Javonte Williams, I still don't trust him, even though all the nice things I said about him before.
I like Javante. I think the Denver offense is somewhat coming back. Seems like they're doing some things, so I don't hate it, but at the same time, I don't love it either. I'm still giving the advantage to Tom. I think it's pretty easy advantage, and we can move on to receiver. Tom has Drake London at Carolina, Neighbors versus Cincinnati. I have T. Higgins at the Giants and Pickens versus Las Vegas. I think Tom has a pretty obvious advantage here. I think both his receivers are top 5 this year so far, somewhere close to that. So neither of mine are, and they're not going to be. So Tom definitely has the advantage, and they both have good matchups as well.
Is Neighbors playing?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, if Neighbors plays, then I agree with you. So good job, Tom. However, I think you have a nice advantage at tight end. Kyle Pitts, I think he may be able to turn it around. He's got Carolina. He looked better last week. So I think he's a pretty big advantage over Cade Otton. And then I think even Demont is a decent advantage over Jameson Williams in the Battle of the Lions at the flex spot. But Tom is going to beat you because he just has too many weapons. But you keep it close.
Yeah, I don't think I'll get blown out. I project I'd lose by like 9. That's going to be my standard this week. I do think, well, I'm starting him this week, so I'll probably score 0. But I do think I have a slight advantage at tight end, but it might be like 4-2. And then Montgomery, probably more consistent than JMO, but JMO could always catch one of those 100-yard touchdowns. So it is what it is. I'm picking Tom. I think that's a pretty easy decision. I think the next decision is also pretty easy. Half of Danny's team is on bye this week. So Danny at QB is Caleb and Zay Flowers. You have Lawrence and Dak. I assume you're going with that. Not sure if you're thinking about Cousins or not, but yeah. So I think you have the advantage there either way. Caleb's looking better. Zay Flowers has actually been pretty good. It'd be pretty hard for Zay Flowers to play versus Baltimore, so I wonder who he's actually playing.
He plays Washington.
Yeah, but another one of my typos. And yeah, do you have any thoughts on the QBs?
I love that you point out your typos like anybody else can see them. Like I'm the only one. Jake, no one knows. You're breaking
Well,
the
you're
fourth
going to call
wall.
them out anyway, so I might as well just get ahead of the
Yeah,
game.
but it's funny when I do it. You're breaking the fourth wall. It kills the illusion. I have not looked much at my lineup, to be honest. That's a Thursday morning activity. I probably start Kirk because he plays Carolina. But excuse me, that's probably over Trevor Lawrence. So I would 100% without Mahomes give me the advantage. Otherwise, I would have definitely given the advantage to Danny if Mahomes was playing. Again, I don't know if ETN is playing. I don't know if Brian Robinson is playing. So my running backs are questionable, but I also don't know if Zach Moss is playing. So all in all, I have the pieces at running back that I'll give myself the advantage over Daniel.
Yeah, Roshan seems to have that goal line job. Maybe he steals a couple touchdowns. Maybe Danny keeps it a little closer than expected. Brian Robinson hasn't looked amazing, and ETN hasn't looked amazing recently. So I'll say it's close, but I'll give you a slight advantage. Moving on to the receiver room, Danny has JSN and Devonta Smith. JSN is versus San Francisco, Devonta Smith versus Cleveland, DJ Moore for you versus Jacksonville, and Marvin Harrison at Green Bay. I think you have a decent advantage here. DJ Moore's starting to come to life. Maybe he can stop pouting on the sideline now. Marvin still getting the targets, so got to expect him to start producing sometime soon. Devonta Smith, first week back, so I'll definitely give you the advantage.
Just saying, Brian Robinson is RB7 right now, so looking.
Well, you ran for 19 yards last week. I know he scored.
He scores a touchdown every week, so it doesn't matter. He can run for 2 yards. He scores touchdowns. So anyway, I don't have JJ this week. He's on bye. So I guess a could theoretically be a nice week to have him on by just because Danny got hit with the bug as well. I think wide receiver is actually pretty close. And then at tight end, Danny goes Brenton Strange, while I have Jake Ferguson starting once again. I actually, I think Ferguson is a pretty decent bad matchup for us, although Brenton Strange has been okay this year. He's had some decent games. I know he had a pretty big game when Tom had him in the revolving door of tight ends that's over there. And then DeAndre Swift versus Alec Pierce in the flex. This is problematic that I gave myself the advantage in every position possible. So I guess you guys know I predict myself to win, but I'm very sorry about that, Danny, because you're my friend.
Yeah, same. I think Danny's team's looking a lot better. And my goal is to stop having Danny as the last team in this every single week. I don't think his team warrants that at this point. So, but this week he has all his buys, so he's going to be the last team on the list.
If Roschon Johnson can legitimately, put up 10 plus points a game and Danny can get a legitimate running back, it's a different ballgame. The rest of his team is put together well. His QB situation's fantastic. Hopefully Mahomes produces a little bit more, but now Caleb's showing up a little bit more. He's always had the wide receiver potential. So it's really just about he's got to get a running back, and that's the same thing with Lyman. And either way, I think we have taken up enough of everyone's time. We appreciate everyone tuning in. We get to see who watches for how long, so just remember that to all our fans out there. Everyone go watch some brisk commercials with Doja Cat, and we shall see you guys next time.
See you guys. Peace.